Hello mappers and non-mappers. Today I will be going over a topic that is very scary for some people, displacements, or natural terrain. In this video I will be going over the extent of my knowledge, including the basics of making displacements and some more intermediate and advanced techniques such as subdivided roads and full 3D skyboxes. So let's just get into it. Before I go into Hammer, I kind of want to explain something about displacements. Usually, when you're working and creating buildings, they're very much like blocks. They're solid, they're rigid, they're the exact shape. What you place down is what you get. Man, I suck at stacking cards. Shit. You see, when you make a block in Hammer, that's all it is. That's all it will ever be. It's rigid, it's flat, you place it, and that's where it stands. But a displacement is more like a piece of paper. Now, just like a piece of paper, it needs to have 4 sides because of source. I don't know the exact reasoning for that. But like a piece of paper, once you place it down, you can still move it around to whatever natural organic shape you would like. You can even fold it, just like a piece of paper. I don't know why you would do that, but it is a very free-flowing medium. I think that's the big difference between building it out of blocks, just like you would a house or a house of cards, versus terrain, which is just this plane that you can move to your full delight, to your full freedom. So, now in Hammer, to show why I brought this distinction up, as I mentioned, you create these brushes, these blocks, and once you've created them, sure, you can go into the vertex tool, move around 1 or 2 of these points here, and it changes the brush, but it will only ever be a geometric shape. There's not much you can do about that, and also cannot be concave. That just breaks everything. So you're very limited in the shapes you can make. There's still a lot of good things you can make with these shapes, but compare this then to a displacement. Now let's get a ground texture. Any ground texture will do. Let's go with this same muddy grass over here. Put down the displacement. And it always starts as a block as well. But select just a single face and create it. And as you can see, we have this sheet here now that you can't see from the bottom. In this sheet, we can change, just like a piece of paper, to any organic looking shape we want based off these triangles here, this mesh that it's broken up into. We can change it around to whatever whim we see fit. Let me Control Z that all. And that's just important because even if you have it placed here, say you want the ground to actually be a little bit higher, you can just bring it up. Now, the original brush stays in place, but the actual ground itself, what you can see and touch and run on, is in a completely different area. Now, this is important to understand because working with displacements is a lot more of a malleable process. It's not as rigid as the brushes that you use to make houses. It's a completely different mindset, and it takes a little bit of practice to fully get into this mindset, but once you do, like most things, it becomes quite fun. In fact, if you go into the map that I showed earlier, Payload Phoenix, and we look at its displacements, as you can see here, it looks perfectly fine. It's all good and natural. But if I go to this button right here and turn off the display of the displacements, it goes right back down to the ground. All of these change position. Now, of course, it's very helpful to create a general shape of the terrain, especially if you're going to work with cliffs and ground and such, but in some examples, you really can just place the blocks down here and work them upwards to create an incline or an uphill or a downhill, whatever you want to create. If that wasn't convincing enough, here I have a Valve-made map, King of the Hill Badlands. And again, beautiful natural ground, but if I turn this display off, it all sinks to the ground. I mean, Badlands is a very extreme case of this because they really just put all of the displacements on one level and then slowly built them up so that they created the exact look they were going for. This point right here is like, I want to see, it's probably around, can I see it? Looks to be about 500 units above where the original brush would be. Something important to note here though, they flattened this part because even though terrain is quite nice to have in Team Fortress, and I'll explain that why in a second, it's also very important to have flat features because gameplay happens the best on these flat features. Too much organic space, too much uphill, and it becomes annoying to fight on. You can have a little bit, but you don't want to confuse the players throughout the entire map. So with that, I say we just get into it. Let me change from the muddy grass to maybe I can find like a, yeah, this is the, I believe the gorge grass right here. And so I'm gonna make a block again. I try to have my blocks be not too thin, but not too thick, because again, we're only going to use the faces that you actually walk on. So everything on the side here for the ground doesn't really matter as much. But I don't like to have it too thin because then it becomes difficult to shape with the vertex tool. Now, creating a displacement is quite easy. You go into the face edit sheet, you click on whatever faces, be it the top, the bottom, the side. We'll go with just the top for now. Go to displacement, click create. I prefer power of 3. I have not done much experimenting with 2 and 4. So I really just suggest for most beginners to just stick with power of 3. And once we have it created, there's quite a few tools here that we can mess around with. So most important, we have paint geometry. Now this has 3 effects: raise, raise 2, and smooth. Or sorry, raise and lower, right? And let me set my radius to a simple 10. You can change the radius with just this bar, but I prefer to do the numbers because I like to memorize the numbers to remember what kind of effect they have on displacement. Like I know that 100 will be a very sharp, but still realistic in most cases, look, while 200 is a great starting radius because it really smooths out, but keeps it still very intense. It still has very intense changes in height. You can keep going higher and it'll keep getting smoother. The higher the radius is, the smoother the displacement will be because it affects more and more of these vertexes here in the triangles. Of course, the further it is from the middle of the radius, the less it'll affect those points. But the distance is the distance that those radiuses move. So if I set it to 200 and I click, it'll go up pretty high and make these, you know. Anyway, the raise tool is one that I very rarely use, but it is quite helpful. Say you want to raise, let's say 100. Say you want to raise this corner here to about 100 hammer units above where it would be on the block. It will set it exactly to that amount. You know, it'll create a bit of a trapezoid here, but it'll set whatever you clicked on to that exact location, which is perfect for, say you have a building right here with a doorway. You can set the displacement to be exactly correct. Now I set it to 100. This looks like it should probably be 128. I did the wrong integer. All right, the wrong property. 128 is too high. really comes down to where you've placed both of them. 110 is almost there. Let's just do 112. Perfect. So with 112, you can satisfyingly match it up as well as possible. Now, usually I just do this with the raise and lower tool, and then I come in with the third tool, which is the smoothing tool. Now, this tool has nothing to do with distance. I can even change this back to 20 if I want to. This has all to do with the distance, because once I click, it'll take the point that is down here and it'll take the point that's up here. It'll create a average between the two and create a slope, which I can just do by clicking. As you can see, using the top and the bottom, we now have a completely smooth downhill. So this smoothing tool is terrific for many reasons. It is the tool, I would say, that makes most structures look the most natural. Say we have a ramp over here that looks just like this. We can select the top faces, turn it into a displacement, and using the smooth tool at a slightly smaller radius, we can come in and just make that look like it would if it really were terrain. And that's terrific. That's just terrific. That's all you need. Raise, lower, smoothing, and if you really need to, you can use the raise to tool. Now, next up, as you can see with this texture, it has a kind of diagonal with one half being just the dirt and one half being the green. Now, these are called blend textures because they have two different textures inside one. And what you can do with these specific textures is you can select whatever displacement, go to Paint Alpha, not Paint Geometry, and this has similar tools. Raise and lower is the one that you will most likely use. I don't think raise to even has a function, and smooth does a kind of randomized paint effect. I like to go with a medium, like just a brush of 3, and I just hold down left click, and look at that. Terrific, just like grass. Sometimes I'll come back in with a smaller brush and just kind of tap here with my right click to get the dirt back. So left click in this instance is the grass, and right click returns it back to dirt. And we get a kind of, natural grass dirt gradient. Now, of course, a lot of these blend textures will have what are called detail sprites built in. And that would just be the flowers, grass, whatever else you want to kind of pop up from the ground. Now, in most cases, those are not custom models that you place one by one. They're built into the texture. Now, to get that info, you can go to this website right here, tf2maps.net/abs is the name of the person who created this, and the detail sprite info sheet. So here we have two things. We have the VBSB file and the detail sprite materials file. If I go back into the map, I can go into my map properties, and you'll see both of these right next to the skybox material. We have the VBSP file and the material file. These have lake sides. Actually, I think I can drop down this, but I prefer to do it from the website. I'm going to assume the detail sprites train yard are what we're looking for. Okay, let me do it correctly this time. We have the detailed train yard VBSP. We put that in the VBSP file. And then for the detail material file, we go in again, get the detail sprites from the train yard to match. And I believe these should be the correct ones for this particular texture. Let me apply. And I think if I turn on this leaf here, yep, we can see the beautiful flowers and grass. And this adds a lot to a map. Just right there, just like this, one button, and suddenly the map looks a lot more finished, a lot more professional, all of the above. Now, this next section, I would say, is really one of the most important parts of displacements, and it's something that a lot of people get wrong. So, say I make a displacement. Let's make one just right here. Let me turn off the grass effect. So I have this right here. Oh, and I create a displacement out of it. And say I have two of these guys, and I do something crazy with this guy at, let's say, about 200. Something crazy with this guy. Whoops. Okay, let me set this back to 5. Yep, and then I come in here and I do something different crazy over here. Now we have these giant holes. And you'll see this in a lot of maps. They usually won't have giant holes, but they'll have very thin lines in which you can see through them into the abyss. Those are called seams. Now, the easiest way to fix these seams is to go in and use what is called the sew tool. Bam. Easy. Completely sewed as if nothing ever happened. I usually like to sew these things and then come in slightly with the smooth tool and just smooth it out a little bit. Though it looked fine before I did this. The only problem is, a lot of people I see will have it off by just a single grid right here. That's it, just a single grid. And now when I come in and I try to sew them, nothing will happen. Now this can be up, this can be sideways, we're off by a single grid. And sometimes this happens accidentally when you're working. You're moving around and then you just accidentally move something to the side. Happens all the time. That's a pretty easy fix if you just moved it because it's built to correctly be next to it. But for some people, when they're creating these displacements, they'll create one guy, one block here, and then they'll do something like Control-C, Control-V. And they'll just kind of drag it to around where they think it should be. And again, this is off by a lot. Even if you get it close, it will not sew until it is exactly right. So I like to just hold shift and drag, really get it correctly lined up, no mess, and there you go, they're connected. Now of course in most maps, they have a more irregular shape. They won't just be blocks, and you just have to really find out how to connect them correctly. Now there's one little hack that I know about, and this one is a little more of an intermediate skill, but sometimes if you need, say, this guy at about half the size, if you line it up to be exactly correct, exactly half with the guy next to it, it will still sew. Of course, when I come in with the raise lower tool, it'll slowly create a seam because this vertex is not lined up correctly with this vertex, so it slowly creates the seam. But if I come in and sew it, bam! Through an algorithm, it is able to find the exact point where it should be, and it looks completely smooth. It just meets up. So you can do half sizes, but you can't do, say, fourth sizes, third sizes. It has to be half the length of this square here, and I use the X in the middle to kind of match that up. Before I forget, I'm going to create what is called a displacement block. It starts off as just a normal block that we have right here. I'm going to make this guy quite large so it's easy to see, but you don't need to have them this big. And usually you just go in and you cut this, you cut the corners in every perspective. So front, side, back, everything. Oh, whoops, wrong way. You really make sure to cut this guy up nice and good. So you have close to every single angle. Sometimes I even like to come in and change the color of, like, say the 45 degrees, I'll make that orange. And then the upward 45 degrees, I'll make that a darker dev texture, just to be able to differentiate. Now, some prefabs usually come with one of these. You can just copy and paste it. There are some I've seen that are much better made than this. Now, of course, they can also meet vertically. Say I have this guy, and he's touching the corner here. If I come in, and I go in again, and I grab this guy, and say I do this. Let me smooth it, actually. Say I do this, but then I go in, and I mess around with this one alone. This will also sew, though let me make it look a little prettier than this. This will also sew, even though if I were to turn off the 3D, they only meet at this one corner, that is enough of a meeting point for them to sew correctly. So you can have it vertically, you can have it sideways, but as long as the entirety of this edge meets this edge, or half of this edge, or this edge meets half of this edge, it will sew together, and you won't have seams, and a lot of the displacements will come together a lot easier. Now, there are some other tools, of course, but I will cover these more in the intermediate and advanced sections. One that I found out actually quite recently is what's called the noise tool. And this one is perfect for, say you have a cliff, especially one in the distance, and the further away displacement is, the more smooth it will look. So a lot of people try to counteract this by giving it a lot of noise so that it looks more rocky. So if I set the minimum to, let's say, -10 and the maximum to 30, it will move these randomly between -10 and 30. So either backwards 10 or forwards 30. I press OK, and there we have a much noisier sheet, but it looks a lot rockier. If I were to add a rock wall texture, say this one, it looks a lot more like a cliff than if it were flat. There you go. Another tool is the subdivision, and I will of course go over this a lot more in detail soon, but I just want to show what it does. Bam, subdivided, beautiful. All those blender heads out there will know exactly what this tool does without me even explaining, but I should explain it anyway. So here's an important question. Why should you use displacements? I've seen a lot of people, a lot of mappers that just decide, you know what? I don't feel like learning displacements right now. Why do I even need them? I'll just make some ramps. I'll just make some sections here. Just throw it around. In TF2, there are two ways to change height. And of course, height dynamics are a very important part of the gameplay. And those two ways are sudden, so say you have a staircase, sudden changes in height, or they are typically displacements, and they are more gradual changes in height. As you can see here, this whole section of the map is a ramp, but it's a very slow and natural ramp. And as you can see here, some of these ramps cannot really be created accurately by just using geometry. They are created using that piece of paper that I talked about earlier. And a mix of those sudden changes in height and those gradual changes in height are two of the most important factors in making fun and satisfying Team Fortress gameplay. Just to go over it real quick, say you didn't want to do a displacement and you wanted the ramp to go up this way, terrific. But now say you want players to also be able to go in this direction, and you also have a ramp set up right here, something like that. But of course you'll have this block right here that you just kind of hit into. Of course, the easiest remedy for that is to just go in, create this displacement, and I can even use just the smoothing tool and smooth that out. And now raise this part, smooth it out again. It's a back and forth process. And now we have both directions as a ramp, gradual and natural, and in a way that won't be irritating to players to maneuver around. So, on a final note, this was the end of Chapter 1 of Displacements. This was just the basics. In the next video, I will be covering the intermediate and advanced sections. So, subdivision, I'll start building actual environmental elements to show how one would go through that. And I hope to see you in the next one. See ya.